Hi guys, it's Jess and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I managed to read in April. So I just want to quickly say that I'm sorry this video is up a little bit later than I had originally planned. I have started some new medication and it has just made me feel very tired and just a bit unwell in general, but I'm feeling much better today, so I thought I would just get this video out of the way while I'm still feeling good. I don't know what my video schedule is going to look like at the moment in the next few weeks, because not only am I on this medication that is making me feel a bit weird, although that should be better in the next week or so, I am also starting work again, which means I will have less time at home to read and to film. So it's just about finding the right balance and figuring out how I'm going to work my YouTube stuff around that. But we'll see. For now, we need to talk about the books that I read in April. So we're going to start with my favourite bit, which are the stats. So in April, I read an outstanding 10 books. I think this is the best I have done so far. I might be wrong, but I'm pretty happy with 10 books. And I read a total of 3,481 pages. My average rating for the month was 3.89, so not really any change at all. And most of the books I read were by female authors, 80%. One of those was a trans woman, and then 20% were by male authors. And my most read genre actually was fantasy. I've been getting back into fantasy recently and I have been loving it. And yeah, I read 6 physical books and 4 ebooks, no DNFs, which I'm pretty happy with. So what were the books that I read in April? I'm going to start with a book that I didn't give a rating to, and that is Birthday by Meredith Russo. So this was a book that I was really looking forward to reading, and it follows 2 best friends, Eric and Morgan, who happen to have the same birthday. Now, we only ever follow them on their birthday every year from the ages of 12 up to 18, and we see how their relationship with each other changes over time, how they grow as people. Eric is big into football and everyone expects him to get a football scholarship. However, he is having second thoughts about that. And Morgan is dealing with the fact that she is transgender, and so we are seeing her as she understands that she is transgender and how she's gonna come out to people and tell her best friend Eric that she is actually a girl. And I thought this story was beautiful. It was really well written and I was really rooting for the characters the entire time, and there were so many gorgeous moments in this book and I couldn't put it down. It was just such a really good read. However, the reason why I didn't give it a rating in the end is because I learned some things about this author that do not put this author in a very good light. This was something that I wasn't aware of when I first picked this book up. I only became aware of it while I was reading the book, and some people were having some discussions with me online about it, and I did my research. I'm not going to go into everything that they have done in their past, but it is behaviour that no one should be condoning. I definitely don't condone it, and that's kind of, I wouldn't say it's tainted the experience of this book for me, because I can separate the work from the artist a lot of the time, but I don't want to support someone who has had a past like that. I just didn't feel comfortable giving this book a rating. I'm not gonna sit here and say that you shouldn't read this book. I'm a big believer in everybody's voices being heard, especially voices of the people who are in marginalised groups, especially trans people. I definitely do think that this book is very important, and I do think people should read it if they want to, but please just be aware of that information when going into this, and you can make up your own decision about whether you want to read this book or not. So now we've got that one out of the way, we are going to move on to all of the books that I rated 3 stars. I didn't rate anything lower than that. I had a lot of 4-star reads and a couple of 5 stars. But for my 3-star reads, we have Beneath the Sugar Sky by Seanan McGuire. I'm quite disappointed because this was one of my 5-star predictions, and I will be doing a video about that next, so keep an eye out for that. But this is the 3rd book in the Wayward Children's series, a series that I have really enjoyed so far. I really liked the first 2 books, and I was really excited for this one the most, probably because the cover is just absolutely beautiful. It was really calling to me, and it just has that kind of mystical, magical world vibes to it, which obviously that's what this series is about. But this book is set in a world called Confection, and it's kind of a world that has been baked and so everything is made out of baked goods like cakes and sweets and stuff like that, which just sounds really cool, and I did get quite hungry reading this. And it's really hard to talk about this book without spoiling it for you guys, but it essentially follows this girl called Renee, who is the daughter of one of the characters in the first book, and she falls out of the sky and she's looking for her mum, and something is happening to her, which I can't explain because it would like spoil the first book if you haven't read it, and that pretty much just sends her and a group of other kids from the school, Eleanor West's School for Wayward Children, off on an adventure into the world of confection. And I did really enjoy it, and there were lots of really funny and delightful moments, but it just didn't have that oomph factor that the other 2 books had. It didn't wow me enough, and it did take me quite a while to get through this, actually, considering it is a very short book. It did take me a few days to read. So yeah, this one just didn't do it for me. And I have seen online actually that a lot of people agree that this is not the best book in the series. But it was still a lot of fun. My next 3-star read was Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. So this is the 3rd book in the Grishaverse trilogy, the Shadow and Bone trilogy. I read the entire trilogy in April. Yes, I jumped on that bandwagon because I knew the show was coming out. And I just wanted to get the series finished so that I could watch the show. And I'm glad that I did, because the show does kind of spoil the last book a little bit. And this one was not the best book in the trilogy. This was my least favourite by far. I did find it quite hard to get into. I think the first 150 or so pages just didn't really work for me that well, but then it did pick up towards the end. I'm not 100% satisfied with the ending. I feel like Alina was done really dirty, but it was still a really fun read. And this is another book that I can't really talk about without spoiling the first 2 books, but there we go. So that brings me on to my 4-star reads, and I'm going to carry on with the Grishaverse trilogy, and we've got Shadow and Bone and Siege and Storm. These books were both 4 stars, and they were both really, really good. Shadow and Bone is a reread for me, and I did initially rate it 4 stars way back when I did first read it, and it was still so much fun to read, and it was really nice to go back actually and see things that I hadn't noticed before when I first read it. But if you don't know what the Grishaverse trilogy is about, it is essentially about this girl called Alina who finds out that she is a sun summoner. So the sun summoner is a really rare Grisha. The Grisha are people who have magical abilities, and they can control certain things like elements or the body, stuff like that. And Alina finds out that she is a Grecian, that she is a sun summoner, and she gets sent to the little palace to live. And she is essentially gonna be like the savior of the world and get rid of this thing called the Shadowfold. We have a really cool cast of characters in these books as well. There isn't a single character that I dislike. And the first book is probably the strongest book in the series, in my opinion. But Siege and Storm was equally as entertaining. It was very fast paced. I love the first 100 or so pages and everything that happened with that. And obviously it introduces Nikolai, which I know everybody loves, and I can totally see why. I love him. He is really quirky and sarcastic and witty, and just the type of person that I would love to be around. So I really enjoyed diving into the Grishaverse, and I can't wait to get my teeth into more. Next we have In an Absent Dream by Seanan Maguire. So this is the 4th book in the Wayward Children series, and this is another one of my 5-star predictions, and it didn't quite live up to those expectations for me, unfortunately, but it was still a really good book, and I can totally see why people would say that this is the best book in the series, because it does have a lot going for it. This follows a character called Lundy who ends up in a world called the Goblin Market. And in the Goblin Market they have this thing called fair value, and it's all about treating others fairly. So I really liked the morals of the story, and how that came to play within the story as well. And yeah, like there was some weird stuff going on in this with like people turning into birds, like if they don't pay off their debts or if they don't use fair value, they get into debt and they turn into birds, which I thought was really cool. But again, it just didn't quite have that oomph for me. I felt like it was missing something. I'm not really sure. Again, it took me quite a while to read this one, but it is the longest book in the series, so I might need to go back and reread this again at some point just to see if it is still a 4-star. But overall, I still really liked this one. Then we have Hold Back the Stars by Katie Khan, and this was a reread for me. I did read this for the Buzzwordathon, and this is a romance book set in space. We are following 2 astronauts who are doing a spacewalk on the space station when it goes wrong and they end up floating away from their space station, and they only have 60 minutes of oxygen left. So essentially they have 60 minutes left to live, and we're kind of flicking from the present to the past, and we're seeing how their friendship and their relationship began and how it developed over time, and they're kind of discussing their thoughts and feelings towards each other. And then we're also following them in the present day as they are trying to figure out how to survive, how to get back to the space station. And yeah, like the plot, really interesting, really different. Like this is a very different romance book. I don't read a lot of romances, and I haven't read many that are set in space. So this was something new and exciting when I first read it, and it was so nice to go back and explore it again. I love the characters so much, and I just, yeah, like there were so many twists and turns in this book that it was so hard to put down. It is quite fast paced, it's very tense, and it's just beautiful. My last 4-star read of April was Pet Sematary by Stephen King, and I was really hoping that this one was going to be 5 stars, but it didn't quite do it for me because of the writing. Stephen King, right, this is only the 2nd book that I have read by him, but both books have been really good, both books have been 4 stars, but the thing that I am noticing with Stephen King is that his foreshadowing spoils a lot of his plot points. And I'm not really going to tell you what they are because I don't want to spoil the story for you, but he will tell you if a certain character is going to do something or if that person is going to die or whatever. He will tell you that that's going to happen like 3, maybe 4, maybe 5 chapters before it actually happens. So then when you get to those bits, you're not in the least bit surprised, and all of the shock and surprise of the moment is gone. It's lost on me. And that really annoyed me. And also, in this book, I mean, the writing in this book was quite good, and there were some things that I absolutely loved, some amazing passages, some amazing scenes that just still stick with me. But sometimes I did find that he was going off on tangents a little bit, and there were some things that I didn't feel were relevant to the story, and I just ended up skimming over a lot of the words just to get to the good stuff. But having said that, I still really loved this book. I loved the atmosphere that he had created in it. It was so brooding, really dark. There were some really fucked up things in it, which, you know, is Stephen King, and I expect that. And it went in a direction that I was not expecting it to go. I mean, I should have expected it because, you know, it's Stephen King, but still, I could not read this at night. It got to the point where I couldn't read it at night because it was just going in a place that I didn't want to be thinking about before I was going to sleep. So there's that as well. It might give you a bit of an existential crisis. So if you're going through one of those, avoid this book. But essentially this is about a family who moved to this house in the village called Ludlow, and behind the house is a woods, and in that woods is a pet cemetery, and then a bit further beyond that is an ancient Micmac burial ground kind of thing, and it kind of explores all of that and all of the weird stuff that happens. It features a creepy cat, so if you like cats, you might not like cats at the end of this. If you don't like cats, you'll probably hate them even more at the end of this. But this book is also much more than a horror story, because at the heart of it, it talks about things like life and death and grief and how people cope with that in different ways and what it all means. And I really, really liked that aspect to it. So it was still definitely worth the read. Really, really solid story, and it's the perfect book for Halloween, and I wish I had saved it for then. I'm joking, I'm so glad that I read it now, because just honestly, wow, it was so good. We're on to the last 2 books, which are 5-star reads, and the first one is Moaning. The Enlightened One returns, Carl Pilkington. So this is a reread. I read this way back in 2016. This is a non-fiction book. Carl Pilkington has been on telly. You might recognise him. If you don't, he was on a show called An Idiot Abroad, which was created by Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant. And they made him travel around the world to see things like the 7 wonders of the world, or to do a bucket list and just do the most stupid things. And Carl sees things in a very different way to what a lot of other people would see things. He's not really interested in travelling. He's more happy being at home on his own, doing his little DIY projects. But in this book, this follows on from a series that he did where he got to look at some of the things that he wanted to look at and learn about. And this book just talks about all sorts of things like art and identity and waste, and the body and stuff like that. And he goes to some really weird places. At one point he goes to this like museum that like displays actual dead bodies in like weird positions as like art and stuff like that. And he also looks at things like extreme ironing, which is a sport that people do where they will climb to like really high rocks in America, high mountains, and just iron their clothes on top of rocks and stuff, which is weird, but people do it. And it was really interesting actually to see these things and learn about these things that other cultures do, and stuff that we find weird, but actually it's quite normal to them. I thought it was really, really insightful. And yeah, like this book is so funny as well. Like some of the things this guy says is hilarious. Like I will say some of the stuff he does say I do not agree with, but you can tell that he really does learn from it actually as well, and he does have a lot of respect and interest in the people that he is meeting and the cultures that he is exploring and the stuff that he's getting involved in. So I really, really enjoyed this book, and I really want to read more stuff by him, because it's really entertaining, and I like non-fiction when it's entertaining and gonna make me laugh. Alright, and the last book that I read in April and rated 5 stars was Six of Crows. I nearly forgot. Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. This wasn't originally on my April TBR. I wasn't gonna do it. I had another book that I was planning to read. However, after watching Shadow and Bone, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I wanted to be involved in the world again. So I abandoned my original TBR plans and picked this one up instead. And I'm so glad I did, because, oh my gosh, this book is so much fun. So Six of Crows follows on from the events of Shadow and Bone, but it's not like directly linked to it. It's set in the same world, obviously, but it's set in Ketterdam instead of Ravka, and it's a completely different cast of characters. And we are following the Dregs. We've got Kaz, we've got Inej, we've got Jesper, then we've got Nina, and we've got Matthias. And there are some other characters in here as well. There's Juiced, and then I can't remember who the other one is, but has their own chapter as well. Is it Pekka Rollins, I think, at some point that he has his own chapter? But yeah, it follows like those characters as they get involved in a heist, essentially. And it was really good seeing these characters interact with each other, because they all have their own individual personalities that leap off from the page. And they all work really well together. Like they complement each other, especially Kaz and Inej. They just work, and I totally understand why people ship them, because oh my gosh, the chemistry. I loved it. I love Jesper. He is my favourite character. I love how vain and cocksure he is. And I can't wait to see what he gets up to in the second book. And yeah, like I really, really do think that this is one of Leigh Bardugo's strongest books. It was written so much better than the Shadow and Bone books, in my opinion. I thought this one was a lot more snappier and a lot more fast-paced, and it flowed a lot better. And there was nothing that didn't make sense. It all just worked really well, and I loved following the clues and trying to figure out what was going on, and all of the plot twists at the end were just amazing. I was loving it. I was reading this with a smile on my face. I was getting my hair done, and I was reading this for hours at the hairdressers, and I must have looked like a crazy person because I was just grinning like that the entire time while reading it. I really loved it. I can't wait to read Crooked Kingdom. I'm not sure when I'm going to get to it, but hopefully it will be soon. I might be abandoning my TBR plans to get to that one. We will see. But alright guys, those were all of the books that I read in April. Please let me know down below if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, whether you agree with me or not. I love to hear your opinions, as always. If you like this video, then please leave a cheeky thumbs up. I would really appreciate it. Please subscribe to my channel so you can see more videos from me in the future, and I will see you all in my next video very soon. Bye guys.